Hi everyone. So obviously, just guessing by the fact that you clicked on the title of this video, you know that this is going to be a quick recap of my July goals and then an outline basically of what my August goals are going to be for my project. So I guess for those that maybe are wondering as far as continuity goes, the other day I mentioned I was about 50 pages away from being done with the third draft of my current novel. I mentioned that the third draft, getting that revised and getting that completed, was going to be my goal for July. So with that, if you're kind of wondering how I kind of edited those last 50 pages so quickly in the past couple of days, well, to be honest, I did a quick pass. So really, if you want to think of it, basically, I kind of dropped that goal basically right at the very end. The reason why is when I was going over this for the third draft, my last 50 pages were a bit problematic. They require more than just general line edits. To be honest, they require potentially some entire restructuring, maybe potentially a complete overhaul on some of these sections here. And so rather than going through and doing, like third draft line edits on sections that I was possibly going to either throw out and redo completely or just completely revise, I decided not to waste my time and spend a week reworking those, and instead decided just to jump ahead and start working on revisions for those as part of my August goals. So where I'm at with the story basically is that the third draft is now done. Obviously, again, the last 50 pages really haven't had a whole lot done between the second and third draft, but that kind of goes into my August goal here. So for the month of August, I have 4 goals, all writing related, but they are going to be a little bit more segmented, as you can kind of tell. I didn't want to bog myself down for about the next 5-6 weeks. We're kind of towards the end of July here, so the next 5-6 weeks, I didn't want to bog myself down with doing an entire pass again of my novel. Instead, I wanted to focus specifically on correcting the areas that need the most attention. And with that, I wanted to also take care of the kind of the next step, which is going to be my query letter. And then obviously I'll go this in a second, but I also threw in an edit on a short story as well. So with that out of the way, quickly go over that. So first goal is revise the first 50 pages. Second goal is revising the last 50 pages of the novel. If you've been following along, I mentioned the first 50 pages were the ones that I needed the most overhaul with. So that's the one I basically spent about a couple weeks just completely redoing. So now that they've set for a few weeks, now that I've wrote it out and it's kind of had a couple weeks to set, I'm going to go back and start revising and reworking those sections. I'm hoping a lot of it will just be line edits and just I won't have to completely restructure things again. When I ended up redoing them, they did seem pretty strong from what I recall. I'm going to go back through it now finally and start finding out. But from what I kind of recall as far as when I did it, they looked stronger than I did before, so it probably won't need as much work. Obviously, the first 50 pages of the novel is the most important in terms of what people are going to see. I've talked before basically about how when you query agents, obviously they want just the first 10 pages, maybe the first few chapters, and so they want to see that first. So that needs to be the cleanest thing that you have. Obviously, everything should be clean, but specifically that at the very least. If that's not, then they're just going to you're not even going to get a request for a partial manuscript or a full manuscript request. Obviously, you want to have the whole thing, again, as perfect as possible, but specifically this part needs to be addressed, both because for that reason I just mentioned, and also because it was for a time the weakest part, and I want to get that strong. In the same vein, last 50 pages need to be redone. It's the weakest part at this point. Obviously, I mentioned before that my middle of my story tends to be, is kind of the strongest in terms of needing the least amount of work. Still true, and unfortunately, now that I've revised the first part, the ending is what needs the most attention now. Just process of elimination, where you revise the first half, the middle is good, then the end of the story is going to be the worst part. Unfortunately, this is actually, it's got some weaknesses that need to be addressed. So that's going to be my next thing, is just revising obviously just the last 50 pages here and getting that strong. Now we get into the last two. So the first one is just doing the first draft of my query letter. I like to do my query letters as early as possible, once I know the story. At this point, the story is there. The whole thing is there. So my goal basically is to do my query letter next. And what I do is I tend to obviously do a lot of drafts over the process. So I'll just basically do a first draft of one, kind of tinker with it for maybe a week or so, and then set it aside for like a week or two, come back, tinker again, and it's just something that you just kind of tinker with. It's for me, I don't necessarily know how many drafts I ever end up doing for a query letter. I just tinker until it looks good. I do have kind of a formula that I write with my query letters, that obviously I know it works. I've talked before with my other book, with getting the publisher and all that stuff to take a look at it. So obviously I know my query letters, at least the format works, but query letters for me tend to be a bit challenging. I think it's true for most writers. It's hard to do that. It's hard to do a mini synopsis as well with that process. It's very difficult. So the earlier you kind of tackle it, I think the better, just because you're giving yourself the most amount of time to make those changes. That some people will say, wait till you've written the whole thing, then query letter. But the problem with that, though, is that, you're going to do one draft of a query letter, and you're probably not going to leave a lot of time to set it aside because you're so anxious to set it off that, you do a first draft, you do a second, third, fourth, you do several drafts in a very short amount of time, and you haven't given time to let the idea sort of set to kind of give yourself that space between it to sort of think it over, and then come back with fresh eyes. Because you're so eager to send it off. So for me, the earlier I do it, it's more amount of time to make these sort of revisions. Last thing is editing one short story. So this is where I deviate from my primary plan. Obviously, you want to focus as much as you can on the story itself. The novel basically is obviously my main goal, and any kind of extra things obviously tend to take away from that. However, I'm starting to get a little bit, I won't say burnt out, but I'm starting to get a little bit taxed from going through the story so many times. When you go through draft after draft after draft after draft, it tends to tax you. One way to sort of, kind of revigorate things, the way to kind of keep things a bit more engaging, if you will, is the idea of sort of switching projects. I actually have a short story that I was working on a few months ago. I wrote it. It was a first draft, and so I'm just going to go through and basically tinker with it. I don't really have any kind of set goal as far as how many drafts I want to get done with the story. It's more of a time frame thing where I'm going to give myself probably about a week. So I'm probably going to give myself about a week basically to just go through and tinker with that. And that's actually going to be my first task I'm going to tackle, is just starting this week. I'm going to be tackling that one first. Just again, to give myself a chance to kind of get out of the same mentality of working on that basically the same novel. Much like letting your query letter set and giving your time to sort of forget about it and come back with fresh eyes. Same thing with the novel. Just tinkering this for a little bit and come back in a week with fresh eyes. And being so far away from it, I'm less emotionally attached. So when it comes time to make revisions and changes and all that stuff, the more fresh that you view a project, the less emotionally attached you are, the easier it is to kind of quote unquote kill your darlings. So that is my August goals, though. I think it's like 5 or 6 weeks. So plenty of time to tackle this. I think I can get this done. Just in terms of difficulty, obviously it's going to be, the short story is going to be the easiest thing, just because again, it's more of just kind of a playground. Like it's more just something for me to tinker with. It's like the short story is gonna be like that car you keep in your garage, and you just sort of kind of tinker in the evenings and kind of fix it up and get it running. Same thing. I don't necessarily have any kind of like plans to send it off anytime soon, so it's just kind of a fun thing to take my mind off of the other project. In terms of difficulty, that's first. Second and third will be probably a tie between revising the first 50 pages and the first draft of the query letter, just because first time doing query letters or first drafts of them tend to be a bit challenging, and obviously first 50 pages it's going to be a bit more challenging, but obviously not as challenging as before. Last thing, last 50 pages. It's going to be the hardest part. I'm probably going to say that probably till the end. Give myself just deal with that last. But that is the goal. So that is going to be what my goal obviously is for August. And then, yeah, hopefully I'll be going into the fall then, looking strong. That's obviously the goal. If I can get into the fall with, basically a good third to fourth draft of my novel, that's basically one more draft or so of major stuff, and then from there basically it's just a lot of smaller things, I think. Could be wrong, but that's a good position to put myself in, I think, towards the end of the year. So with that, hopefully, if you're following along my journey here, I hope this was a bit exciting. But other thing too, by the way, is starting in August, I am going to be doing an announcement on my 200th day of writing every day. Basically, there'll be kind of some changes that are coming to this channel. Bit more geared towards more information, more education, and more like lessons on writing. That's kind of my goal going forward with this channel too. So I'll be making a whole lot of basically announcements on that in about a week. But for now, these are the goals for my project for August. Yeah, let's see if I can tackle it.